There is nothing better than curling up with a good mystery novel. And it's even more fun when you can meet the author and get personally acquainted with him and his characters. And so we welcome our next guest, Sarasota resident and author Philippe Diedrich, aka Danny Lopez. Congratulations on your new book. It is called The Last breath.
The Last Breath.
The Last Breath. Oh, that sounds very, very good. Now, why a pen name? You are Philippe, and yet you write as Danny Lopez.
Well, I wrote 2 other books as Philippe, and Philippe Diedrich is a really long, complicated name. Danny Lopez is easy to remember. It's a combination of Danny DeVito and George Lopez.
Oh.
But also, my agent suggested it's a different genre, and they say that readers don't really skip genres. They don't go from a romance to a mystery, or from a literary novel to a mystery. So the idea is to create a different brand.
So are you really all these characters, plus you are Dexter Vega? That's the character you're writing about. That's your series.
Right. Dexter Vega is a laid-off reporter from the Sarasota Herald who takes on investigating. And
really?
That's what he does to make a living.
So are you also him?
Maybe a little bit.
A little bit. So you were never a reporter, but you were a photojournalist.
I was a photojournalist for about 15 years. I worked at the Sarasota Herald for 2 years. And a lot of my friends there got laid off. A lot of people in newspaper business are getting laid off. So that's kind of how the idea came about. He's kind of a little bit of an angry guy because of his, he really believed in journalism and what he was doing to change the world, make things better. And instead, he's kind of a bitter guy.
Now, you are a professor at Ringling and a very successful author, but it didn't always start at the top. You started at the very bottom. I read that about you.
Sure, well, we all do, right? I mean, I started working at a gas station, and I washed dishes. I worked in a photographer's photo lab. So little by little, just kind of climbed the ladder, worked at a small newspaper. So, yeah.
Well, so what made you write your first book?
Well, the first book is actually called Sofrito, and when I was a photojournalist, I used to meet all these writers, and I thought they had the best life because they didn't have to be out there doing anything. They kind of hung out at the bar and wrote. And I said, I want to do that.
Yeah, me too. That sounds pretty good.
I know. It's actually not like that.
Oh, really?
That's what I discovered. So, yeah, so I started writing this book. I had spent a lot of time in Cuba, so I wrote a book about a Cuban American returning to Havana to try to find a recipe, a secret recipe to save his restaurant. And that became my first book.
And then how'd you get it published?
Oh, that's another story. After about 10 years and maybe 150 rejections and a lot of revisions, I eventually found somebody that was interested in that subject matter, and it just happened to coincide with the time when Obama lifted some of the sanctions against Cuba for traveling to Cuba. So it worked out fairly well.
Oh, very good.
So I think things were kind of lined up.
Well, tell me the plot of your latest book.
So in The Last Breath, Dexter Vega contacts a very wealthy individual who lives at the Sanderling in Siesta Key, and whose son drowned in the Intercoastal, but his son was a very good swimmer, so he doesn't believe the police report and wants to find closure. So he hires Dexter to find out exactly what happened. And the whole story takes place, probably about 90% of it takes place in Siesta Key and goes to all the different haunts there, and there's some development scams going on with closing Beach Road and all that's going on right now.
Oh my goodness, these are things we will recognize.
Exactly.
But is the rest of the country as interested in these things as we are? Maybe because so many people come to the most beautiful beach in the world.
Well, that's a good question, and I guess we're going to find out when the book comes out.
One thing I like is about your publisher, because your publisher is based here on the Sun Coast.
Yes.
So that's interesting to me, that not only are we able to have such great authors here, but we're also seeing a lot of publishing coming out locally. Is that how you chose them?
Yes. Well, what I did is I did a search for who is publishing mysteries, commercial mystery publishers specifically, and that's kind of what they do. So I said, well, let me check these guys out. And then I looked at their website, and I see that they were in Longboat Key. Now they're downtown. And I said, well, let me send it to these guys, and they liked it. The Last Girl, which is the first one, takes place, half of it takes place here in Sarasota, and half of it takes place in Mexico City. So it's a little bit more international, and as far as the mystery is concerned.
So we're getting a lot of mystery books published right here on the Sun Coast.
Yes, I love that. Those are my favorite books too. So you've got The Last Girl and The Last Breath, so you're working your way through Last Things.
Yes, the next one's probably going to be The Last Drop of Blood, I think.
Has something already inspired you?
I have a general idea. It's nothing specific, but it might take place in Key West. That's what I know.
Ah, very interesting.
Yeah.
What a great life you have.
Oh, thanks.
And I cannot wait to read this book, The Last Breath. So don't miss it. And for more information on Danny Lopez and his Dexter Vega series and more books that he has written, go to oceanviewpub.com.